F126 was cancelled, but instead released as a DLC for F125, bringing in the new cars, the new driver lineups, as well as the new teams such as Audi and Cadillac. The 2026 cars can also be used in MyTeam, so of course we're going to simulate the next 10 seasons of Formula 1 to see what driver moves are made, find out the most unpredictable race winners, and will Kimi Antonelli still dominate the sport in the future. But before we do begin with that, make sure you like the video if you enjoy, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and test out the new feature of hyping this video to push it out to more viewers. We're going to switch up the format a little bit here, starting with the race winners. Now, Oscar Piastri would end up being the first race winner and breaking the curse of the Australian Grand Prix. His teammate Lando Norris saw success at Monaco, with both Ferraris taking victory, much like Max Verstappen, George Russell and Kimi Antonelli, who took victory at the very first Grand Prix in Madrid. But it would be the Ferrari team coming out on top at the end of the first season, just ahead of Mercedes and McLaren, with all three teams scoring over 600 points across a 24 race season. Piastri would be the lowest race winner down in P7, with Kimi Antonelli surprisingly not being in the title fight either. Neither of the Ferrari drivers would win the title despite their joint success, with Hamilton down in P4, just behind his teammate Charles Leclerc, who could only manage a P3. The reigning champion of Lando Norris finished just ahead in the runner-up spot, just 10 points behind the newest champion, who comes in the form of Mercedes driver George Russell. Russell did take his very first Drivers' Championship winning 6 races, just like Leclerc, with Norris only winning 5. Hamilton, Verstappen and Piastri managed to win 2 races each, while Antonelli's win at Madrid was his only one of the season. Now, despite Ferrari's success, they actually dropped both of their drivers at the end of the season, in favour of bringing in the latest world champion George Russell, alongside the Red Bull driver Isaac Hadjar. Oscar Piastri makes a move to fill the Mercedes seat, with Gabriel Bortoleto joining McLaren, allowing Jack Crawford to come in and make his debut with Audi next year. Taking the open Red Bull seat will be Esteban Ocon, with Sergio Perez moving to Haas, and Cadillac signing Victor Martins for next season. The one last driver move will take place as Fernando Alonso has decided to retire, as Pepe Marti will make his debut with Aston Martin next year, alongside regulation changes to both the chassis and powertrain departments. There were less race winners this season, with just 5 compared to last season's 7, with Norris starting strong winning in Melbourne. Oscar Piastri managed to carry on winning after moving to Mercedes, with both Ferrari drivers and Max Verstappen all topping the podium. Not much change in the Constructors' Championship, with Red Bull rising to second, but still couldn't compete with a new Ferrari lineup, who managed to retain the team's title. Last season's runner-up Lando Norris dropped outside the top 3, with Isaac Hadjar taking his new Ferrari up to 3rd place. He finished just 7 points behind his former teammate Max Verstappen, who managed to move up to the runner-up spot. However, it would be George Russell who remained on top despite moving to Ferrari, as he won back-to-back world titles. He managed to win 8 races across the season, while his teammate of Hadjar managed to win 7. Verstappen only managed another 5 race wins, with Norris winning 3 and Piastri winning just once after moving to Mercedes. And there will be literally no driver moves at the end of the season, with the only changes coming in to hit both the aerodynamics and powertrain departments. An increase in race winners this season after Kimi Antonelli returned to winning ways. Norris once again won the opening race, with Verstappen winning the iconic Monaco Grand Prix. Reigning champion George Russell kept winning, just like Oscar Piastri, as Gabriel Bortoleto won his first race, and Esteban Ocon was able to take a sprint victory. We did see some pretty major changes in the constructors, as Ferrari dropped to 2nd, being overtaken by the Silver Arrows of Mercedes, outscoring their rivals by just over 100 points. The Mercedes drivers would then match Ferrari from last season, finishing in 3rd and 4th place, with Piastri finishing the higher of the two. The reigning champion George Russell dropped down to P2, being overtaken by a returning champion, as Lando Norris once again rose to the top to win his 2nd world title. He took 8 race wins, with Russell taking 6, Piastri managed 5, with both Antonelli and Verstappen winning twice, while Bortoleto saw just a single race win. There will be driver moves at the end of this season, as 3 drivers, those being Esteban Ocon, Pierre Gasly and Arvid Lindblad, are all dropped from their teams. Red Bull will bring Alex Albon back to their team, with Jack Crawford joining Williams, while his former teammate Nico Hülkenberg replaces Gasly at Alpine. Valtteri Bottas leaves the new Cadillac team in favour of the Racing Bulls, allowing Richard Verschoor to come in and make his debut next season. Audi will then need a brand new lineup, as they provide debuts to both Roman Stanek and Joshua Dirksen. The aerodynamics and powertrain departments are then targeted once again with regulation changes. There was even less competition this season, with the only race winners either driving for Mercedes or driving for their championship rivals of Ferrari. The Constructors' Championship would only be contested between those 2 teams as well, with Ferrari just missing out, once again finishing behind Mercedes, who retained their title. Lando Norris finished as the best of the rest in P5, just behind Isaac Hadjar in P4, and Antonelli, who secured his first finish inside the top 3. George Russell once again fell just short of returning to championship glory, as another new champion is set to be crowned. This time, the Australian Mercedes driver Oscar Piastri has managed to overcome the odds to etch his name into the history books. He finished just 12 points and a single race win ahead of George Russell after he managed 8 race wins while Russell and Antonelli both won 7. All 3 drivers managed 2 sprint race victories each, with Isaac Hadjar also managing 2 Grand Prix wins. The former champion Lando Norris will be dropped by the McLaren team, while both Nico Hülkenberg and Roman Stenhouse were both made free agents. None other than Max Verstappen moves over to McLaren, with Red Bull bringing in former rival Charles Leclerc as his replacement. Richard Verschoor will then join Audi after a single season, with Valtteri Bottas returning to the Cadillac team. The Racing Bulls bring in Lance Stroll, allowing Tim Tramnitz to debut with Aston Martin next season, while Pierre Gasly is brought back by Alpine as we head into Season 5, and the small regulation changes will once again only hit the powertrain department. Once again there was only just 4 race winners, with both Mercedes drivers tasting success, but George Russell would be the only successful Ferrari, while Pierre Gasly found unexpected success to take his Alpine to victory in Las Vegas. The Constructors' Championship remained pretty similar, with Ferrari finishing as the runners-up, and Mercedes opening the gap to take another championship title. Now most of the Drivers' Championship was 2x2, including the top 4, where 2 Ferrari drivers finished behind 2 Mercedes drivers, as George Russell fell with another position to 3rd place. He was overtaken by his former teammate Antonelli, but 6 race wins wasn't enough to catch Oscar Piastri, who managed to keep his title after taking an incredible 12 race wins. George Russell managed another 5 race wins this year, and Gasly's win in Vegas was his only success this year. Some pretty major driver moves will happen at the end of this season, as Kimi Antonelli is dropped by Mercedes, after they decided to bring Lando Norris back to the sport. Tim Tramnitz, Franco Colapinto and Carlos Sainz will all leave F1 as well, with Liam Lawson joining Aston Martin and Esteban Ocon returning for the Racing Bulls. Gabriel Bortoleto is then signed by Alpine, with the open McLaren seat being given to Charles Leclerc, and Oliver Behrman replaces him at Red Bull. Valtteri Bottas once again leaves the Cadillac team, this time in favour of returning to Williams, with Richard Verschoor once again returning to Cadillac. 2 more debuts will be made next year, with Ritomo Miata coming in at Haas, while Rafael Villagomez will be signing for the Audi team. Once again, some more possibly major regulation changes will hit the chassis, powertrain and durability departments. Those changes actually didn't provide any more race winners, as once again just 4 drivers saw victory, and once again it was just Mercedes drivers, including Lando Norris on his return to Formula 1, or the Ferrari drivers who managed to secure race wins. The Constructors' Championship remained pretty similar, with the only changes being Audi and Aston Martin moving up a place each, meaning that Mercedes would once again retain their Constructors' title. The Ferrari driver Isaac Hadjar would once again fall just short of the top 3, as he finished behind former champion Oscar Piastri, who dropped down to 3rd place. He was overtaken by George Russell, who claimed the runner-up spot, but finished 11 points behind the latest champion, as Lando Norris was able to secure 7 victories on his way to another Drivers' Championship. Now despite this, George Russell managed to win 11 races but still lost out, while their teammates both managed 3 race wins each. But at the end of the season, Lando Norris does pull a Nico Rosberg and retires from Formula 1, with Oliver Behrman being brought in by the champions and Colapinto returning to drive for Red Bull. McLaren will have a completely new lineup next season, with both Verstappen and Leclerc leaving the sport, after labouring Bortoleto back to the team and partner him with Callum Voisin. Roman Stenhouse then fills the open seat left at Alpine. Cadillac and Audi will swap drivers, which sees Richard Verschoor once again returning to Audi, while Bottas is set to leave Williams. He replaced his former teammate Perez, who moves to the Racing Bulls, replacing Esteban Ocon, who will find his footing at Williams. The chassis and powertrain departments are then once again hit with some regulation changes. Dropping down to 16 race seasons, and we drop down to just 3 race winners. George Russell first found success in Australia, with Behrman securing victory in Monaco, and Piastri was the only other driver to secure race wins. Constructors' Championship doesn't see much change once again, with Aston Martin finishing in 3rd behind Ferrari, while the champions of Mercedes continue to finish at the top of the sport. For the 4th season in a row, Hadjar finished in 4th place, once again behind Oscar Piastri, with George Russell also once again finishing in 2nd place. Norris is out of the sport, so he wasn't the champion, but his replacement was, as Oliver Behrman rose to the top of the standings to secure his very first World Drivers' Championship title. He had a strong season, outscoring Russell by 2 race wins and 17 points. Oscar Piastri finished a point behind Russell, while also winning 1 race less. After just a single season, Callum Voisin leaves McLaren, being replaced by former champion Oscar Piastri. The other former champ George Russell returns to the Mercedes team, with another former champ returning as Lando Norris is set to drive for Ferrari. Joshua Dirksen will then leave Cadillac, being replaced by Isaac Hadjar, while Ferrari bring Kimi Antonelli back to try and regain their title. Rafael Villagomez is then replaced at Audi by Tim Tramnitz, while Red Bull and Aston Martin swap drivers going into Season 8. A massive lack of changes as once again both Mercedes drivers take race victories, while Kimi Antonelli is the only Ferrari driver to get a W. The only changes in the Constructors' Championship come between P5 and P9, as Mercedes once again take the title, and I think something has glitched in this game. Now I forgot to take a screenshot here, but the Mercedes and the Ferrari teams were just well ahead of anyone else. It kind of looked like all the other teams were missing an entire tier of facility upgrades. But this did mean that the top 4 were just from these 2 teams, and will be for the rest of the seasons. Lando Norris finished in 4th place after failing to win any races, finishing behind Oliver Bearman, who only managed to win once. George Russell remained in P2, with the inevitable eventually coming true, as Kimi Antonelli took his Ferrari car to victory to win his very first Drivers' Championship. He managed a gap of just 7 points over George Russell, with Russell winning 7 races compared to the champion who managed to win 8. A small domino effect starts with Alex Albon leaving Red Bull, being replaced by Franco Colapinto, as Aston Martin bring Max Verstappen back for the penultimate season. A much bigger domino effect is then caused by Esteban Ocon leaving Williams, allowing Pepe Marti to take his seat, and Oscar Piastri set to partner Verstappen at Aston Martin. Lando Norris leaves Ferrari in favour of returning to McLaren, with George Russell once again joining Ferrari and Bortoleto moving over to Mercedes. Richard Verschoor will leave Audi for the final time to partner Lando Norris, while Nikola Solov is brought in for his debut in the penultimate season. Once again, only 4 drivers won races, but of course they were only from Ferrari or Mercedes, as Bearman managed to win once, Bortoleto 3 times, Russell 5, and Kimi Antonelli won 7 races. But that did result in a change at the top of the Constructors' Championship, as Ferrari returned to glory and stopped Mercedes from winning their 7th title in a row. Both Mercedes drivers finished behind their Ferrari pairing, with Bortoleto being the driver to finish inside the top 3. Antonelli did fail to retain his title this season, falling just 5 points short of the returning champion George Russell, who managed to rise back to the top of the standings after moving back to Maranello. The last set of regulation changes will hit both the powertrain and durability departments, while we also see 3 different drivers fail to reach the final year, as Audi will have a completely new lineup, dropping Nikola Solov and Tim Tramnitz in favour of Kush Miney and Freddie Rasmussen. Lance Stroll is also dropped, being replaced by Victor Martins, allowing Alex Albon one final season driving for Cadillac. Verstappen and Pepe Marti will swap cars, while George Russell once again returns to Mercedes, replacing Oliver Bearman, who moves to McLaren, as Lando Norris also makes a return to Maranello and is set to drive for Ferrari. The Ferrari drivers would once again taste success as both drivers take race wins, much like both Mercedes drivers, while no other driver touched the top step. Ferrari would once again come out on top in the Constructors' Championship, finishing just 15 points ahead of Mercedes. However, Lando Norris could only take his Ferrari as high as P4. Gabriel Bortoleto managed to stay inside the top 3 after both him and Norris won 3 times each, but just behind George Russell, who managed 4 race wins for a runner-up spot. The final champion of the simulation would of course be Kimi Antonelli, who scored almost 300 points to take the championship title, also winning a total of 6 races along the way. And that reaches the end of the 10 seasons, and I must say I'm quite disappointed with the results. Now, as you can see, only Ferrari and Mercedes managed to win Constructors' Championships, with only one Drivers' Championship being won by a driver not driving for one of those teams. I'm not entirely sure what happened to the development of the cars. I did try and make as many changes as I could to try and produce more race winners, but it just didn't work out in the end. George Russell stayed at one of the 2 teams, and he ended the simulation on top after winning an incredible 64 races, while also becoming a 3-time world champion. And that's going to wrap up the first video on the F1 2026 DLC. Now make sure you drop a like if you enjoyed and subscribe if you haven't already. There'll be links in the description to my various social media platforms, including my Patreon and Discord server, which is the best way to receive updates about uploads, live streams, but also to have a chat to me and other viewers of the channel. But that is going to be all from me today, so I hope you have a good day, evening or night, wherever you are, and goodbye.